Calling all technology coaches. Join Fort Edge this summer for a 2-day coaches camp packed with high-quality professional development exclusively for you. Attendees will work with like-minded coaches on creating strategies for teacher relationships, executing coaching cycles, and building a culture of coaching and tech integration within their school or district. There are 2 opportunities to attend Coaches Camp this summer. Join us either June 25 and 26 in New Orleans prior to ISTE 2022 or in Cincinnati on July 28 and 29. Please visit forward-edge.net/coachcamp to reserve your spot today.
Aloha, I'm Katie Ritter.
And I'm Justin Thomas, and this is the Restart Recharge podcast, a podcast by coaches for coaches. We bring the tips and tricks to help you in your everyday work as an instructional technology coach or whatever they call you in your school district.
So hopefully you're going to leave this episode with us today feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
And we have an awesome episode today because coaches work with a diverse set of educators, and not only do coaches take into account the experience levels, the content areas, and general backgrounds of these educators, they might want to start considering an entirely new variable: generational differences. Educators make up a pool of very different generational representation: Millennials, Gen Xers, and Baby Boomers. So this episode is going to explore how coaches can better understand the needs and values of each generation to build their capacity for effective technology integration. So today we have Ben Sondgeroth, and Ben is here because he had an amazing session at FETC that one of our coaches, Brooke, was able to join in. And we have him on here because it is going to be an awesome episode talking about these generational differences. So let's introduce Ben here. That passion that led Ben to become a national instructor and presenter, allowing him to work with thousands of educators across the country. So now working for the LTC of Illinois. His focus is on helping districts in Illinois leverage technology effectively in the service of learning. He has presented national conferences such as FETC, ISTE, IdeaCon, and many more. He holds a master's degree from the University of Illinois and a bachelor's degree from the University of Indianapolis, and currently lives in Dixon, Illinois with his wife, Rose, son Ritter, and future baby Sondgeroth coming in May 2022. So welcome in, Ben. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Justin. That was the first time I think I've heard that bio read out loud. So I was like, it wasn't too bad. I was kind of nervous. You know, when I always write them yourself, you're like, I wonder how that actually reads. So yeah, that's okay. I'm happy with it. So good job. Thanks for reading that for me.
Yeah,
oh, you're absolutely welcome.
You passed the bio test.
Yeah, that's right. Especially the little ending line. Like usually like when I submit it to conferences and stuff, like I lead off like my wife because like, yeah, who cares? But you know, so I'm glad I figured I'd throw it in there for the podcast listeners though.
Oh, I'm sure that she really likes it and is happy with it. So
She wants the shout out.
Exactly. Well, hey, Ben, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit more about your background, and how did you become so interested in this topic of coaching across generations?
Yeah, so, you know, it's kind of cool. So, like, my background is I was a high school history teacher to get started in this, like, educational journey.
Nice.
That was all I wanted to do. I wanted to teach high school history. I wanted to coach varsity baseball. I played college baseball, played high school baseball. Like, it was like the mission since like, I think it was 6th or 7th grade was like, grow up, be a high school history teacher and coach baseball. And I did that right away, right out the gate. Got a varsity squad, got to coach, got to teach. It was awesome. But then I got a chance to get iPads into my hands in my second year of teaching, actually. So 2012, when the iPad 2s were brand new. And that actually like opened up this whole new world of technology to me. And like, I was all in, like from the get go, like this is going to change education. Like there's actually a Facebook status, and I don't know about you guys, but whenever my like memories come up, I like look at like what old Ben said, and I'm like, oh my God.
Like, am I going to be mortified by this or really proud? Yeah.
Yeah. Like I look at it, I'm like, why did you put that on there? This wasn't Twitter, but like I guess Facebook kind of was Twitter back in like 2007 and 8, right?
The original.
But there's one status in particular that like I got an iPad and I put it on there like I just got my first iPad. This thing is going to change education. And it's just funny, like every year when it comes up, I laugh and I'm like, that set my career on like this completely different trajectory than where I was before. because it like I started doing a couple of workshops locally, and like I presented at a conference, and I just got this bug to help teachers like integrate technology. And so I decided to make it a career, and I switched from what I always wanted to do, which was teach history and coach. And I went in to be a director of technology. Didn't really enjoy that. I don't like the boxes and wires aspect of technology in education. It's hard. I don't get it. I'm a history teacher. Like I don't understand networks and things. Like I still tried to figure that out, but it's not my jam. Started working for ed tech teacher. Then after that, got a job with them. So that's where the nationally part gets in. I got to go all over the country, work with schools, do PD. Just really like loved the travel aspect of it. Right up until my son was born. And then I was like, man, this travel aspect was like really cool, like pre-kid, now not so cool. So decided to look for something a little more local, which led me here to the LTC, which is what I work for now, the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. And so as a regional ed tech coordinator for the LTC, we facilitate anything educational technology related in the greater state of Illinois. So we have all 857 school districts that we support. I have the northwest corner. I'm from Dixon, small town, 16,000 people out in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours west of Chicago. And I get to travel all over the state, working with educators and leading events and consulting with schools. I get to do a little bit of it all. So it's just been a really cool journey, going from history teacher to what I get to do now and impact lots of different educators and stuff. So so that's kind of my journey in education, I guess, to get to me where I am now. And then your question about like, where did this topic come from? So it actually is like a combination of all of those things. You know, working with educators like you guys get to do, and you guys get to see, like, you know, there's like one of the things that I at least found when I was with ed tech teacher, it got to a point where I was actually doing a lot of redundancy. Like we were working with VILs and Digital Promise, and we were doing a lot of the same workshop over and over and over again, which gets to be boring when you have to do the same thing over and over again. But it was part of the program, so we had to do it. So I started to like kind of analyze people like on the side. It was like easy for me to go in and be like, this is what you do with your iPad, do it. And then like work with them, right? And like, they were great. But like, then I was like trying to figure out like what makes these people tick? Like, how can I better like be a people person and like relate to these people and like social analyzing administrators and like, you know, just getting the vibe of places. And a lot of that actually relates back to my history background, where this all comes into play. Because I found that when I was teaching history, in studying history, I liked to analyze the social component of history. So not so much like, I don't find myself fascinated with like world leaders. I find myself fascinated with the people how the decisions that world leaders make impact the people around them, right? So a leader can make a decision, but then what's that like for the person who's just living on the street? Like, what was it like to live during the Great Depression? What was it like to live as a civilian during the American Revolution? Like studying how those people ticked and like what the environment around them is something that really like just fascinates me. So when I started to actually do some research on like generations and stuff for this presentation's history is actually one with my dad. So my dad was a educator, he was an administrator.
Oh,
and we got asked.
Nice.
Yeah, right. So it's in the family. This is actually his old office. Like I used to work in the office as
Really?
the same office as him. Yeah, so kind of cool. Got to go see my dad at work every day for 3 years until he retired. So that was neat. And he was very active in the community. So he was actually approached by the Chamber of Commerce, and we both were in education. So like, you know, business world separate from us, but they knew that we worked with like lots of different generations. Like he's a baby boomer, I'm a millennial. And so they asked us to do this presentation about what it was like to work and manage people of different generations. And so we started to do some research on it, and I found that like it was a like perfect topic for technology to like take it another step further in technology and education and really dive into what makes people tick from a historical perspective, and then match that to how we can meet them where they are with educational technology in the same way. So like, you know, we go into a classroom with a boomer, like what does their background and how they were raised actually reflect on how they learn and how we can approach them with technology. So that's why I'm super passionate about this like topic, because it's like a culmination of history, technology, coaching, like education, all wrapped up in one. So yeah, that's That's my pitch for it.
Yeah, well,
it's super fun.
Yeah, and it is. Our team was fascinated by. I mean, Brooke came back after your presentation and, shared your work with the rest of us. We were all pretty fascinated. It's kind of like people watching to the next level. I feel like that you're doing with some of that analysis. Yeah. So, okay, so for those folks who haven't gotten the download on this presentation and in the work that you did at FETC. You really went through like the different generations that are currently in the workforce. Just like you said, you gave kind of this historical background of sort of what their generation really lived through and what kind of defined some of the character traits and like anything. It's not a one size fits all just because you're a boomer or a millennial or, Gen X or up and coming Gen Z, or doesn't mean you will absolutely like be motivated by this or that or operate in this way. But it definitely helps us as coaches think about things in a really kind of unique way by, hey, this is how you were impacted. This is how you were made to think and believe more than likely, this group of folks. So it really kind of helps put some of these things in context. So with that kind of thought in mind, how can coaches best support some of the different generations that we have currently in, that we are supporting with baby boomers kind of leaving a little bit, really getting close to retirement, in retirement, lots of, maybe Gen Xers, millennials, and then those Gen Zers kind of coming up the pike here into the workforce. What tips would you give or advice would you give to coaches working, how they might think about approaching these different generations differently and working to support them?
Yeah, sure. So Katie, you actually made it like a really good, like you used a really key word there with like providing context, because I think that's what this is really like. One of the things that we actually look at is like, or I have actually seen, and I think this is a commonality amongst people that work with a variety of different generations, is you also fall into like the stereotypes. And sometimes you're like, oh, that's a stereotypical baby boomer. Like they don't know what they're doing. Or like, the Gen Xer does this, or the millennial, oh, they're always on their phone, or the Gen Zer is unconnected. It's like those are stereotypes that they're there and they exist, but some of them have like a foundation, like more than a stereotype. Like they provide like you need the context as to why maybe that person's acting like that, right? So that's that's a great way to like frame it, is like to put it there. So for like the purpose of this, like we broke down, like you break down generations, and this varies across research, like across lots of different, like you look at these ages and they're all over the map. And if you ask somebody what they are, they're going to probably identify a little bit differently. So when I say an age, like don't get offended, hopefully listeners.
Loose range.
Yeah. I've said like where the millennial cut is, and some people are like, I'm not a millennial. Don't include me in that group. I'm like, oh, you kind of are. Like, I'm sorry, but like,
I hate to tell you this.
So, yeah. And it's also funny too, because like 6 years ago when I did this, like where the age cuts were don't actually reflect with like where they are now. So it's like a moving target. I don't know. It's yeah. Like I looked it back up, and like I was revising a presentation from even like 3 years ago, and I was like, wait, that's like 6 more years onto this age group. Like that doesn't make any sense. It was only 3 years ago when I found these numbers, but anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
So like you have like a traditionalist, which is somebody that's like 75 and over. They're like the retirees. They're your volunteers in your classrooms, more than likely. They're your substitute teachers, that are coming back to just like hang out because they just can't, stand not being in the classroom, right? So like that's one age group that's like very much out of the workforce, but somebody as a coach you might run into from time to time. Like if it's an active sub that's there and they need to log on to take attendance and but they probably haven't been in a classroom, some of them, for like 20 years, like as an active teacher, like as a full blow active teacher, like they were retiring. Like I'm 35, like those teachers were often retiring when I was in high school. So those people are, most of them are retired. They're going to be there. The thing to like keep in mind with them, like if you do run across these and you have to support a traditionalist, like one of the things that I find with them is that they love, and this is something that's a trait, it's a character trait of them. Like they love to be valued and offer the opportunity to mentor, right? Like we have to tap into that generation's like knowledge of things. And these are the ones that like showing them as valued members of the society still is like super important to them. You know, like being able to like tap in and ask them a question, because you know, it's like one of those things like, oh man, like I just can imagine like when I'm that age, like, oh, the young whippersnapper's asking me a question, like I feel valued, right?
I feel like that now sometimes, Ben.
I know, right? Yeah, like you get that value, right?
Like, what do you mean TikTok?
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I got nothing on TikTok. That's the Gen Z thing I can't relate to. But so like you have this traditional generation. We're not going to focus a lot on them because they are like low in numbers. But just something to be aware of. Like value them. Ask them to mentor. Ask them to be a volunteer if they need help on something. Like you might have some older tech people that are like aging out and like they just want to come help and like value that and stuff. So it's just one of those things with the traditionalists. But the big one here, there's two big like age demographics, is the baby boomers and the millennials that are dominating the work, or the Gen Xers and the millennials. Like those are the three that are dominating the workforce right now. Boomers are starting to retire, and if there are baby boomers that are listening, I'm going to call you boomers. There's no offense to that, but it's just easier for me to say boomer over and over and over again. I'm not saying it in a way that's like, oh, boomers, like, but it's just fun to say too. I don't know. Do you guys like saying boomer? I think it's funny. Like, oh, boomer. I don't know, whatever. But so a baby boomer. Like these folks we're looking at like 60 to 75. That's kind of our like range on a baby boomer here. These are the folks that they actually, and my dad was one, and I'm sure like you guys, we all look like we're very similar in age. So like I'm sure your parents are probably in the same category. Like one of the things that we find with these folks is that they lived a lifestyle of like more hours equals greater work output. Like they were always at the school if they were a teacher. Like they're super early, they stayed super late, they were working on grading papers during holidays. Like I think of my aunt, who was a retired AP US history teacher, and she would come to every holiday with like a sling bag that was just filled with AP history essays that she had to grade. And we get done eating dinner and we're sitting around and us kids are playing, and she's sitting there just grading these essays like the whole time. And you're like, man, that sounds like zero fun. You know, like what a terrible way to spend your holiday. Like, but she did it because that was her thing. Like it wasn't leave work at work. It was like, no, like I have to keep working. The other thing that it's like interesting, I think, when we look at this is like they're dedicated to their place of work too. Like they're the generation that like showed up to work day one and is like, I'm just going to work here for 40 years and then I'm going to retire.
Yeah.
Because I'm loyal to this place. And even if I don't like it, I'm going to stay. Which is like sometimes to their detriment. Like a lot of these things, like they probably now regret. Like my dad, like regrets all the hours he put in and tells us that. He's like, we didn't go on vacation because I was just working all the time. And I really regret that now. And so like when we look at like how we want to support these folks that are kind of on the end of their career, if not retired already. But like, I find that one of the things with like working with them, and specifically like in technology too, is like, we have to show them that their tried and true lessons like can be enhanced with technology. So that's a big thing that I try to use, in a word that I try to use when I work with anybody really. And this goes for Gen Xers too.
Yeah.
But like with baby boomers especially, like I use the word enhance. Like I'm not going to make this better because that sounds like it was bad to begin with. So I'm going to make it better. You know, like saying, you know what, that's a really good lesson, but like, let's enhance it with this technology. And then how this can then like continue to grow, right? So like one of the values that they get is they get positive reinforcement. Like positive reinforcement goes a long way with a baby boomer. And so like you treat them with such. So like they do something good, and it's hard for us as technology professionals sometimes to like see a very minimal task get completed and get excited about it. But like for them, that minimal task that they completed could be a huge deal. And so like I always feel like I put on a little bit of a cheerleader hat with baby boomers, like over almost any other generation, and support them. And like they do something, I'm like, you did it, like let's go. You know, you shared that Google Doc, like you created an assignment in Google Classroom, like awesome, like good job, you know. And like let's do it again now, like let's reinforce it, like let's keep going. Give them that encouragement, you know, because they don't get that a lot. Like they come in with that mindset of I'm bad at technology, or I don't understand technology. Well, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, but like the negative mindset of them coming into a workshop or a coaching session can just derail you right off the start. So, because it's not something that they've done before. or they're nervous about it because it's not the exact same thing that they've done for 35 years as they've been teaching. So.
And Ben, I really like too how you said something like the key word is enhance. And to me that stands out because I also think that this age range here is there's still a lot of like our building leaders and district leaders in this age range that we are trying to get to support our work as technology integration coaches. And a lot of things start with them and their understanding and their support of it. And if they're not used to it. So I think we just wrapped up. By the time this episode airs, it will be the first episode after all 3 of our 3-part mini-series around admin and coach relationships. So I think maybe my brain is still on that just a little bit. But I think that's super important too. Like for coaches, you know, we just had this whole 3-part series talking about how important it is for you to work with your admin. You know, I think that maybe that's important to think too, even if you're not helping support them, like implement their staff meeting, but still like even in your approach to talking with them and talking about how you can support teachers in a way that may connect with them differently than just here's this technology, we should be using it now.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways that I like to do that and frame that too, especially with admins or teachers, but both, is like sometimes to get them to buy in, like showing them the productivity tasks that their job can get better at quicker. So it's like, hey, I'm not going to, like, that admin's not going to need to sit in on you, like, revolutionizing the world in Google Slides. But, like, if you can show that admin, like, how they can quickly, like, share a collaborative Google Doc that allows everybody to voice their opinions, or a Jamboard like that they can, you know, be able to show and brainstorm as a group, and it made everything like so much easier for them, then like you've got to win, right? And then they buy in, and then they understand your value. They understand the value of some of the stuff that the teachers are doing. So yeah, absolutely. Like our leadership, a lot of them are in that baby boomer age. Our superintendents probably more than anyone, you know, like our admins are probably in that Gen Xer role, and then our age group, and then like our principals or building principals and stuff. But then you get those superintendents, like those are where our baby boomers are, you know? So yeah, then they're important. They make decisions, you know? So, so yeah, supporting them. And another thing too, is like showing them how they can do stuff like with technology in their personal life. I think it's a huge buy-in too for baby boomers. Like, hey, here's how you can take Apple clips on your iPhone and like make a really cool video of all your grandkids, like doing really fun stuff. Like just an equip will like, look at this, you got this awesome video. And then they're like, that was easy. I could do that with my kids. Like, cause they have iPads in the classroom or they have iPhones. Like, what if they did the same thing? It's like, yeah. And then you get them to buy in a little bit with that. So yeah.
Awesome. So let's transition to Gen Xers. How can coaches support our Gen Xers and our millennials too?
This is a super interesting group. Like Gen Xers, they're like really close to me. They're, you know, right above. They're the ones that are probably predominant in our workforce right now. There are teachers that have been teaching for 20 years. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I find Gen Xers are the hardest sell on anything, because sometimes baby boomers, they're on the end.
I'm pleading the
fifth. Fair. I'll take that bullet. Yeah. But sometimes the baby boomers are like, yeah, whatever, let's roll with it. Like, I'm about to retire anyways. I don't care if it blows up. Like, they can't do anything to me. I've been here for 35 years. Like, try it. But Gen Xers are like, nope. Like, I don't see it.
And ballpark age range for the Gen Xers that you're using to...
You're looking at right around that 42 to 59. Okay, so you're looking at those folks that are kind of close to retirement. The end is near. Like, there's light at the end of the tunnel. They're locked into what they've been doing. It's been working. We've sent tons of kids to college doing this the same way. Like, we've got a great graduation rate at this school. I've heard that at a lot of like independent schools, right? Like, why do we got to bring technology in? We're getting kids into Harvard, left, right, and center. It's like, I get it. We can make it better. Like, we can make their learning better. Like, we can even, the enhanced thing comes in again here with this group a lot, right? Because one of the things that they value is they're super goal oriented. Like, they are super independent. Like, that's the Gen X way, that they thrive on independence and they want to be challenged, and they're always going to ask why. Like, that's this group of age range that's like, well, why do we have to do that? And not in a why, like sometimes Gen Xers put on millennials, like that millennials are like, why do we got to do this? It's like, why? Prove it to me. Show me how it's going to change my students' learning. And if it does, I'm all in. But you have to show me examples. Like, and show me why this is going to work, how it's going to work, and then I'm going to do it. And they're independent. And here's a really funny antidote, I think, about this independence. So baby boomers, don't have so much of an independence because that's an age group that had, that they were defined in the historical concept of growing up like post World War II, post, Korea, but it was still an age range when like dad was the one that was going off to work and mom was staying home. Our Gen Xers were really the first generation where mom went into the workforce full time.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are our latchkey kids. Like they're the kids of the 70s and the 80s. And it was mom and dad both went to work, both worked 40-hour work weeks. They were, they were working hard. And it was like, we're going to leave you at home all summer long. Go out on your bike, ride around, come home when it gets dark for dinner, And so they were on their own. Like that's where this independence comes from. Like this is the first generation of like kids that was really like thriving like independently in the 80s and the 90s when like life was good and you didn't worry about the creeper down the street because he didn't have Facebook to show how creepy he was, right? So like you have like
sad but true.
Right? Yeah.
Better times.
So they want what we're looking at with Gen Xers is like giving them the experience of why this is going to help them and like showing them concrete examples. I often treat like a Gen Xer with like, hey, here's a challenge that I want you to do with this technology. And I'm not going to hover behind you while you do it because that weirds you out. That makes you nervous. I'm standing there. I'm pointing at your screen. I'm usually not doing that. I'm around so they can help. They can ask for help if they need it. But I'm not going to be hovering like unless they directly ask me a question. Versus a baby boomer where I might like stand there and actually like help them. And I might actually like move their mouse for them to show where it's at. Like I'm not going to so much do that with a Gen Xer because they're thriving more on that independent streak, right? So being close by to them, I think is super important versus like a baby boomer where I might be more like up with them one-on-one. Gen Xers, I'm going to encourage a nice like community of like ask questions, like be vulnerable, like go out on a limb, and then I gotta show them examples of why this is going to work, and that's, I think, really important as coaches is providing those like, hey, this is a Google Slides that this history teacher did at this school right here. See how cool this is? See how the learning's changed here? Here's how you can use Mode. Here's how they're using Flipgrid. Here's how they're using Book Creator. Like, and that's why they're doing it. That's why they're good at it. So Gen Xers are definitely the interesting group. These are our Ron Swansons. Like, these are the ones that are like, if this thing doesn't work, I'm throwing it out the window. Taking the computer, I'm unplugging it from the wall, and putting it in the dumpster. Like this thing's garbage.
Yeah, that just gave every listener a good visual.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah,
they now have their teacher's face on top of Ron Swanson's body.
It's just Ron Swanson to a T. Yep.
So what about millennials?
Yeah, so our millennial group, this is me. This is 24 to 42. And that 42 mark weirds 41, 40, 39, 40, 41, and 42-year-olds out. They don't like that.
This is depending on if you'll claim it in that upper echelon of the generational tier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm claiming
I hate to say it, but like
I'm claiming
it is more millennials. And even if like there's a lot of like leniency in these age groups, like I could definitely see some 40-year-olds falling into Gen X for sure. Like I said, it's all over the place. But millennials are the interesting group here. Like I'm one of them, so like I feel this, I live this every day. It's actually been eye-opening to kind of like research some of this stuff and be like, oh yeah, that's why I tick like that. Like that's why I respond to something like that. Like it makes sense. And one of the things I think is important with millennials when you're dealing with them, especially if you're a Gen Xer and you're a Gen X coach and you're working with millennials, is that you have to understand that just because a millennial is sitting there, like they get done with something really fast and they whip out their phone, it's not because they're more than likely they're not paying attention. It's not like, oh, I'm not paying attention, I'm on my phone. It's like they're able to just do stuff faster. They might not know it beforehand, but they're getting stuff done quicker, and then they don't care if they get their phone out and they're like scrolling Twitter or Instagram. It's not that they've checked out, it's just that they're done. And they're like, yeah, I'm done. I got my challenge completed. Like you gave me a task, I did it. So I'm just gonna wait for the next one. And there's a little bit of different discrepancy between baby boomers, how baby boomers and Gen Xers feel that, because like the baby boomers were like on a clock, we're gonna punch the clock from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Gen Xers are like, I'm gonna get this done, boom, boom, boom. And millennials are like, you gotta tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then when I'm done with it, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, I'm done. So now what? And they're very independent in that way, but it's a different type of independence than a Gen Xer. And the other thing that comes with a millennial is you have to like challenge them, give them a problem to solve it, And then you have to make sure you give them feedback on that. So like when they're sitting there on their phone and you don't go up to them and engage with them and ask them like, hey, did you, like as a coach, like you present a challenge in a workshop, like, hey, do this. And then you don't follow up with them, they're going to be like, they might not ever go back to it because they never got any feedback on it. Like I appreciate feedback. Like when I do something, I want somebody to pump my tires or tell me what I did wrong. Like positive feedback means a lot to millennials. Being valued means a lot to millennials. Including them in teams with older people, like older generations, means a lot to millennial. Like having a voice, I think for our generation or my generation, like really means a lot. You see that a lot, like in recent events, like when you look at like people that are, you know, out there voicing their opinions and protesting and standing up for stuff, like it's a lot of it's the millennial age group because like we feel, I'm doing collective we here for millennials, like we need to feel our voice needs to be heard because some of the older generations didn't have their voice be heard, you know, or it wasn't heard. And so that's why like the baby boomers tend to shut down, right? Like, or whatever. Like, so millennials like that feedback. Like give them constructive feedback, give them positive feedback, let them know how they're doing because otherwise they're going to sit there and maybe spin, especially when it comes to tech. Now, here's the big thing, like when we're talking about technology and supporting millennials versus like Gen Xers and baby boomers. And the reason why millennials tend to maybe be better with technology is not because like part of it is like we grew up with it, like totally. But the other part of it is, and I'm on the edge of this, and I don't know, Justin and Katie, how old you guys are, but like I'm right on the edge of this in my mid-30s of having like, I have it, but like people that are like 5 to 10 years younger than me don't have it as much. But I have this extreme amount of scar tissue from Microsoft tools. And like, and this is
I can
like
say I'm with
the
you there, Ben. I'm
flashbacks.
not sure Justin is, but I for sure am.
yes, like we have this like complete scar tissue that has been built up from Microsoft tools and not saving something, or the computer crashed, or the printer.
We
didn't
remember
work.
a time when there was not an autosave.
There was no autosave. This
That
goes
was so
for
good
like
these
baby
days.
boomers and Gen Xers, and then us millennials that are in our mid-30s and above. Where the reason why sometimes these groups are hesitant to use and try technology and to click a button is because we've all been burned by the button not working. And then we broke it. And then now it's like, what do we do now? Like we just lost our entire research paper that was due in 20 minutes of school, right?
Yeah.
So it's bad. Like that's really bad. And that's hard to like chip through. And I think that's what a lot of like baby boomers and Gen Xers have of I'm not even going to try and click something because it might break it. Versus a younger millennial or a Gen Zer that's like, I don't care. It's Google. It's saved it. I'll be able to get it back. Like whatever. I'm just going to click around and figure it out. So it's not that they are better at it than anybody else. It's just they're a little more fearless in that.
Yeah,
So when you
and I
give a
think that
millennial a
is
task,
so important. I mean, Brooke shared that like specific nugget with our team, and it was like you could just kind of like look around the room, and it was like everyone was like the little brain exploding emoji, and it just made so much sense because in the past I've said like, you know, a response that I have like to coaches sometimes or even teachers is like, it's not that you're good or bad with technology. It's just like the coaches aren't afraid to click and try, typically speaking, right? So when like I thought that was like comforting in some ways, and then hearing your take on maybe why that is, it just made so much sense. Like, of course, there's like some PTSD there of like, no, I'm not like, is it okay to click? Like, I can't tell you how many teachers or educators have asked, like, can I click this? And they want to like double check that they're clicking the right thing. I'm like, yeah, just go ahead. And I wasn't understanding it, and your take on why with that perspective, again, like the context, and that doesn't mean every single person in that generation is that way, but when they are behaving that way, it just like, it made me have this entirely new frame in my mind of just like empathy and how to approach someone being afraid to just click the button, right? Like, because they've lost everything before.
We've all lost it before. And it's the worst feeling in the world to know that what you worked on so hard is just gone. You know? I lost so many pictures when my laptop from college died. Some of them are really good that they are gone. Like, you know, they needed to disappear. But I lost like a bunch of them though. And I'm like, I like long for some of those memories that I just don't have anymore. But now like there's Google Photos now. Like literally everything is backed up if you have Google Photos on your phone. So like, I'm never going to lose a picture of my son unless I somehow like lose access to my Google account. Like, I'm going to have them all. And that's unbelievable compared to where we were 10, 15 years ago. It was like, you know, if you didn't have an external hard drive that was, you know, 100 gig, you were not saving your pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they would be gone if your computer crashed, you know? So yeah, it's just, that's the antidote with like working with a millennial of why they might get stuff done faster. It's because they have no hesitancy in clicking. And, you know, like they have a real open mind. And then this is the one thing that is tough for some of the older generation to understand too, is one of the things with millennials is they're not tied to their place of business or their place of work or their school. Like, if they don't feel valued, they're gone. Like, they're going to go get another job somewhere. And I think that's a real problem in education right now, where like teachers are leaving, millennial teachers especially, are leaving the field because they're not vested maybe in their pension. And they're just like, you know what? I'm only a couple years in, 5 years in. I don't have that much saved in retirement yet anyways. I can go make double doing something over here for this company. Peace. I'm out. Like, that's it. Like, I don't care. And whereas like some of those teachers that are Gen Xers and baby boomers put up with the same stuff, but they stayed because that's what they're supposed to do. Like, if you went to another school, you would start back over on the pay scale and you wouldn't get your years, and they didn't want to hire you because you had a master's degree. Like, we've all heard those like things, right? And it's like, don't get your master's until you're 4 years in and you have tenure because you're too expensive and they'll riff you. You know, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go somewhere else that pays me more then.
Yeah,
you know,
Ben, I'm so glad that you brought that point up, because when Ben was sharing this, as someone who is like the leader of a team, two things keep me up at night. And that is the retention of our customers that we serve and the retention of the people on my team. And so I think that it was interesting to hear how you got started, and it was presenting this to a business, right? You know, from a business perspective, because I think, you know, for any, you know, our primary audience is coaches, but for any leaders, education leaders that are listening to this episode, I think that this is so important to also hear these key nuggets that you are gifting us with, this information from a retention perspective. Because, you know, I this was something that I actually asked Brooke when she was sharing. You know, I asked if you had talked about this, because I remember myself, you know, my mom is in that baby boomer, right, where she was like loyal, started working 18 years old, worked. And then when I was in, I think it was when I was a sophomore in high school, she lost her job because they were having to, you know, whenever the recession was, she lost her job because they had to cut costs. She had been loyal. She had worked there for over 20 years. And I saw it like rip her apart for a while because it was nothing she did. It was just unluck of the draw, right? So I immediately had the sense of, companies aren't loyal to you. Why should you be loyal to them? You know, and so I have very much, if I don't feel valued, if I don't feel like I'm like getting an opportunity to grow, like that's when I look for another job. And so I totally hear that. So I hope that our education leaders are, obviously our coaches can take so much out of this and how we approach and empathize and work with our teachers, but I hope our leaders can understand some of this and how we have got to rethink the system and how we are pouring into all of our educators, regardless of your position, so that you are feeling valued. Because, you know, I know in some of my own research on retention, Gen Z coming up right after millennials, it's going to be even worse, better, however we want to look at it. It's going to be even more prominent for them to feel valued, to feel like they have flexibility, to feel like they have experiences and people are for a good cause. So it's just going to be amplified even more.
And I think coaches play a huge role in this too, with like partnering with the administration to make sure that that's happening. But also, like, you as a coach are one of those valued components to support teachers that a district can provide to retain them.
Amen.
Because like, the refrain is like, I'm going to leave because I'm not supported. And that's one of the things, like millennials, like if we're not supported, we're gone. But a coach can be there to support. So if you're a coach and you understand how these millennials are ticking, and you can be the one to support them, and you can make your stuff fun and your sessions fun and your engagement fun, like that helps. That all drives the climate that like stirs this drink that keeps people around, you know, and you can be that support that an admin maybe isn't providing. Like, if they feel unsupported by an admin, you can maybe fill that void to like help with them and keep them retained. So I think coaches play a big part of that middle ground to help in that world. And yeah, because us millennials, we're a fickle bunch. You know, sometimes.
We are. Well,
Yeah.
Ben, I love that so much. And I think that's maybe kind of the perfect time for us to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back to hear about some stories, some personal stories that Ben has had. And of course, stick around to the very end to hear his top tips for coaches.
Instructional coaches support teachers, students, administrators, and really everyone in the district. In fact, research shows that instructional coaching is one of the most impactful forms of professional development that results in improved teacher instruction and student achievement. But who is supporting the coach? Forward Edge provides multiple year-long mentorship options recommended by the Google for Education Certified Coach Program to help you gain the valued support you need as an instructional coach. Visit forward-edge.net to start giving PD to the ultimate PD providers. Looking for a program that reaches all teachers in learning new tools to integrate in their lessons? Edu Badges is the answer. Edu is an anytime, anywhere badging program that is designed to take bite-sized tools for instruction and teach teachers how to use them. Edu has received the ISTE Seal of Alignment for educator standards, and each badge in our expanding library is aligned to the ISTE standards and the SAMR model. Learn more about the program that teachers call addicting at forward-edge.net/edubadges. Welcome back to the Restart Recharge podcast. Justin Thomas, Katie Ritter. We have Ben Sondgeroth here joining us talking about coaching across the generations. And Ben, you've given us some really enlightful information on kind of those age range. They're very, kind of blended, but that's okay. On how to look at supporting traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and then the up and coming Gen Zers. But is there any personal experiences or stories that you'd be willing to share on these generational dynamics that have played a role in your time as a coach that maybe are kind of interesting or fun?
Where do you want to start? We've all
Throw a
got
dart,
some-
pick a story.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple. There's good and bad. There's obviously good and bad out there, and good and frustrating maybe more is the word. I'll tell a funny, frustrating one that really just stood out. So I was doing this workshop down and Brooke might have relayed this one because this was just unbelievable. So I wear an Apple Watch. I'm an Apple guy through and through. I got done with this workshop I had. It was a Google Level 1 certification workshop. So we were prepping teachers to take the certification test. And there was 28 people in the workshop. I always like to keep my workshops usually to 25, especially that one, because it's pretty intense. Mm-hmm. The lady kept saying, hey, can we add one more? Hey, can we add one more? Hey, can we add one more? Finally, I was 28, we're done. That's it. I'm not taking it anymore,
I've been there and I feel your pain more than you know.
Yeah. And this group was absolutely the most challenging group I have ever had in any workshop in the 7 years I've been doing this. I was in a conference room that was fairly big, but not super big. It was just a nice size room, 2 per table, 3 per table to fit 30 people in roughly, right? And I got done with the day and I had walked 7.5 miles around that room because that's how needy this group was. There were 15 teachers from one school that their administrator made them go to it, was telling them they had to be certified, and it was the day after they got out of school.
I bet they were super pleased.
They were just so pumped to be there.
Yeah.
Their mindset was not good. And I was trying every trick in the book to get them to be engaged, and it just wasn't working. At one point, one of the, I think she was a Gen Xer. I know she was actually. So there's 2 stories from this workshop that stand out. So this is a Gen Xer one. We'll start, and then we'll shift to a baby boomer. I'm telling, when I do these Google ones, I try to put little anecdotes in, oh, hey, you can do this in Chrome, along with this thing, but it's not on the test. But it's just a helpful thing that you can do. So I showed a couple of these, and I'm showing one, and this lady, talking about independence, speaking her mind, Gen Xers, she raises her hand. She's in the back of the room, and I said, yeah. I said, what do you got for me? And she goes, is this going to be on the test? And I said, well, no, but it's a, cool thing to do. Good thing it'll help you. She goes, let's move on then. And I was like, what? Did you just tell me to move on in my own workshop?
Very strong.
I was like, what the heck just happened? Like, did she just tell me, like, well, it's not on the test, move on? And I'm like, whoa. Like, so it was like that. She didn't see the value. And so she was ready to get going. It was not a part of the test. The why was not there for her.
Mm-hmm.
So she was ready to go. And I was like flabbergasted. Like, I was like, oh my God. She was sitting right next to a baby boomer, same school, who, I'm not kidding, I think I went behind her and talked to her. Out of the 7 miles I walked 4 of them just to get back to her. Because she was just hand up constantly throughout the entire day. Just hand up, hand up, hand up. And we're doing a Google Sheets challenge. And they had to I think it was just like a sort range or conditional formatting, I can't remember. But it was insert chart. That's what it was, insert chart. So she raised her hand. She's like, I don't know where it's at. And I'm like, okay. So I go back behind her. I'm standing there. And I'm like, go to insert. And she takes her mouse on her Chromebook and goes up to the menu bar and then just keeps going. I don't see it. I don't see it. She was literally circling the word insert with her mouse and was generally I don't know where insert's at. I can't find it. I can't find it. I can't find it. And I'm like, it's right. I just want to be it's right there. You're circling it. I'm like, it's right there. It's just right there. Nope, stop. It's right there, right there. And then in my head, I'm like, oh my God, it's right. What are you doing? It says insert. Can you read it? And but I'm on the outside. I'm like,
one of those silent screaming moments, I call it.
Slow down, And then finally she goes, yes, exactly. And then she finally she goes, oh, there it is. And she clicks on it. And I'm like, okay, we're done. She's like, I don't see where chart's at. And I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, it's just halfway down. It's right there. She's like, I don't see it. And we started it all over again. She started circling the insert menu. I'm like, just read. But she was had that mindset of, I don't know what I'm doing. I am going to be basically I am this baby boomer, dumb technology user, self-proclaimed, self-anointed. So you have to take and show me everything. And so that's a lot easier in a coaching one-on-one situation to be able to have that patience and that in a bigger group when you have 27 other people that also need your attention. It's a bit more frustrating to deal with. But they don't see those things. They don't, I shared a Google site with my dad that I had made and he shared it with his staff. And one of the things was click this to learn about this thing. And it was a picture. And he had baby boomers on his staff that couldn't figure out where to click because they have grown up with web 1.0 that was just text.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a hyperlink has to be blue and underlined. A picture is not something you click on. They don't get that. Or they didn't. Now it's more prevalent. But when I was doing this 5-6 years ago, when this story happened, they didn't know.
Yeah.
They're what do we click on? What do you mean we got to click on a picture? We don't do that. It's no, you just click on the picture. So those were two ones from that day that I ended up I got a text from the lady who was organizing it in the middle of the workshop. She's like, now I see why you only wanted 25 people in here. I'm like, I know. I told you. I know what I'm talking about. But then, you have, good stories, too. You have the teachers that just, resonate. You have the millennials that, I use that, get on their phone thing. I was doing just another certification workshop. I don't know why these stand out. But, there's this gal, and she was younger. She's a little younger than I am. And I'll give them a challenge. She gets done, and I'm she's on her phone. And I'm like, oh, okay, weird. And then, I walk by. I'm like, oh, she's done, though. Then give another chance, move on to the next thing. She's done. She's back on her phone, flipping around. I'm kind of getting a little annoyed because I'm what are you doing here, And then we got done. She's like, come up. She's like, thanks, that was awesome. I had a really great time. I can't wait to go take the test and I think I'm gonna pass. And then she emailed me 2 days later. She's like, hey, I passed the test. Thanks so much. That was a great workshop. And I'm like, oh, she was engaged the whole time. She was just yeah. So, there's just little things like that, little tidbits that kind of make your day, you got to laugh at them. You got to get home, maybe have a cocktail and then laugh about it and tell the story on a podcast.
Yeah.
For everybody to laugh with you, hopefully. But the one about the circling of the insert thing, I'll never get over that. I couldn't believe it. I mean, she circled it 7 times. And I'm just it's right there. Just click it. But yeah, so it's good stuff. It's one of those things you got to have empathy.
Yeah. Well, and having that background knowledge of maybe where she's coming from and everything, I'm sure in the moment, right? We're all human. Like, of course, that's why I call it silent screaming, because it's like you're screaming in your head and you're like smiling and nodding on the outside and being very patient on the outside. But, we all have those moments. But I think that's, that's helpful to know as a coach to keep in mind for the next time you're in that situation, right? That maybe there's some other things at play that like we have taken for granted because of our background or our generation and things that have structured and impacted us. But I think those stories that you shared, Ben, kind of play into our last question that we have for you. And then, of course, if there's anything that you want to share that maybe we didn't like specifically ask, feel free. But we end every episode of the podcast with like quick top 3 tips. So Justin has clever names for them, but the question has landed on me this time. So I think
she did that intentionally.
Yeah. So, no, I didn't. So what are your top 3 tips for other coaches from all of this knowledge that you have that we can take back to help improve our coaching practice when we are working with educators across all generations?
I think a lot of it has to do, we'll start with like the biggest one, and I just kind of said it, but it's like that having empathy for their background and like how they were raised, where they're coming from, why they are the way that they are. And it's not a stereotype, but like just understanding that like that independence, that when they get kind of snippy with you isn't like, maybe not malicious, but like that's just that, like that's their thing. That's how that generation works. Like, so like have empathy for understanding like the independence part of that and things like that, so the empathy part is huge. I mean, that's just being a good person in general, like, and being, there. I go to for like a strategy across all generations. So for my second tip is just constantly providing positive feedback. I think that resonates with every generation. It's just like that positive affirmation, that positive feedback, I think is so helpful. Like it makes people feel good. And that's what we're all about, right? Like making people feel good, even if it's the most mundane task that they completed. One of the principles I use sometimes when I ask teachers in a coaching session or a workshop is I use a visible thinking routine of praise, question, polish. And so it's like, do something, like I want you to tell me something that you did that was good. Like praise yourself, because teachers often don't do that. Tell me something that you need to, like, what's a question that you have, and then what's something you can polish and get better at. So it's not a negative thing, like, like what's something you did wrong. It's like, no, what could you get better at? Like, what could you polish up? But the praise part of that, I think, is something we can do too, is like, it's like, hey, share something you did with technology. I don't care if it's a win that you shared a Google Doc through Google Classroom. That's like one of the more simplest tasks that's out there, but like you did it. So good job. Share that, that's important. Or you recorded a podcast with your students. Like that's awesome too. 2 very different levels of the SAMR spectrum, but like equally as important to a baby boomer as it might be to a millennial, right? So that positive feedback, I think, is really important. And then the last one, I think, as far as like coaching across all generations, stuff that spans all of it, is having a personality that is relatable and approachable for everyone to feel like they can come to you. I think that's so important when you're coaching too. And like, again, some of these things may seem like, yeah, of course, like check the box on all that stuff. That's called being a good human, is what it all comes back to. But like, honestly, like as another little antidote of what happened, like after my presentation at FETC, I had a gal come up. She was a coach. And she's like, I made a comment, and I didn't get to it here with the millennials thing. But like I said, like in my session, I said, millennials, like we have feelings and we like to express those feelings. And when people are mean to us, we don't like that. And we will show that we are sad. Or like when people are positive with us, then we are happy. And we will show it, where a Gen Xer or a baby boomer might bottle that up and like, they get angry and they're on the inside and they're complaining in the teacher's lounge. But as soon as the door opens, like they're silent. They don't express that. Whereas a millennial might be mopey or something like that. And it's like, it's not a bad thing, but like you have to understand that that's a thing that's happening. And I think that comes back to like being relatable, being approachable, being understanding as a person to the people that you're coaching, right? And like understanding that millennials do have feelings. Like everybody has feelings, but like if you tell them something that's not positive and they get sad in a positive like way, like that's like there. And I'm going to also like push the blame onto the baby boomers for that, because you guys are the ones that gave us growing up freaking Barney and I love you, you love me. We're one big happy family. So what do you expect? Like, our TV was telling us to be happy all the time and to have feelings, so that's on you, baby boomers. So you can't be mad when millennials have feelings, because the TV that you guys all created told us to have feelings.
Yeah.
So, so there's my thing on that too. But yeah, those would be my top 3 tips, with, just compassion in general to kind of sum it all up. Like,
good human tip, like you said.
Yes.
be a good human. I think I always relate back to that. It was like, was I a good human today? I hope so.
Yeah.
That's like what I always go back to. Like, just be a good human. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm too optimistic sometimes, but that's the millennial in me, right?
Yeah.
Well, Ben, do you have a social media account that you'd be willing to share in case any of the followers on the our podcast like to follow you as well?
Yeah, sure. So it's at Mr. _Sondgeroth. It's SONDGEROTH on Twitter. I try to tweet about educational stuff. I more sometimes tweet about sports stuff. I'm a super passionate sports fan.
Oh, well,
Me
Justin
too.
and Tyler on our team will be right up your alley then.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a good 50-50 split.
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
University of
generous.
Illinois tweets right now with our basketball teams rolling. I was at the game last night. We won the Big Ten regular season championship, stormed the court. I am very tired today because I didn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning, but
Oh,
I'm
fun.
here recording the pod. So,
Thanks for joining us.
yeah, well, I had to come to work anyway. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Any other ways
But-
that listeners could get a hold of you then, if Twitter's not the best way?
Twitter's a
or-
good one. I mean, I'm there all the
Yeah.
time. You can also, if you want to follow more of what Ben's doing social life wise. I love posting on Instagram. Probably too much. I'm a millennial, so I like Instagram, right?
Mhm.
That's just Ben.Sondgeroth on Instagram. But that's more if you like golf. I do a lot of that, so I take a lot of golf course pictures. And then my family too. We're always doing fun stuff, having fun and posting things and going places and traveling and stuff like that. But so that's more definitely social stuff. There's no educational content that gets shared on that at all. But Twitter more so. You can DM me on there. You can reach out to me on there. You can email me if you want. Is bsondgeroth@ltcillinois.org. That's kind of hard to find, but I'm actually fairly Googleable, which is weird to say, but there's not a ton of Ben Sondgeroths out there, which is kind of nice.
There you go. Lucky you.
There's a lot of Justin Thomases,
Yeah.
including a famous
Yeah.
one, but
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah,
we'll
so
make
that's
sure to
how you
link-
can find me. We
Yeah,
can
and
talk.
we'll link all of that in our show notes too to make sure that
Yes.
listeners can
Perfect.
find it. So
Perfect.
restartrechargepodcast.com.
yeah. Are you any conferences coming up? Just real quick.
This summer, my wife is due, as I said, May 16th. The baby is coming 8 a.m. May 16th. So that is putting an fortunate pause on my summer conference season. Not going to be at ISTE
Right.
because the baby will only be 5 weeks old. And I wanted to be like, hey, babe, I'm going to New Orleans for 5 days. See you later with the 5-week-old. But didn't think that would probably fly.
You
So
decided to
I,
save the marriage instead.
Save the marriage,
yeah.
yeah. He's got the
So
shout out
passed
for
on
Erwin.
that. If you do have listeners in Illinois, though, we're doing an awesome event for the LTC called EdTech Next. It's going to be in Galena, Illinois, which is an amazing town in Northwest Illinois. It's going to be at Eagle Ridge Resort and Spa. 2 days of unbelievable learning. Just in the mornings, though, because it's summertime. It's August 1st and 2nd. 8 o'clock to noon both days. But the afternoon on Monday, you get to actually partake in any of the resort activities that's part of your conference registration. So you can choose to go horseback riding, zip lining, you can play golf on their golf course, or you can take a shuttle to downtown. A lot of teachers did that last year, and then they hit up the wineries that were downtown Galena, which that was cool. And then we have a dinner that night on the patio that overlooks Lake Galena, and then you get to come on at 8 a.m. the next morning and do 4 more hours of learning, and then you're turned loose for the day. And it's only $150, and it's all included in all that.
Wow, that's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, so you guys should come to Illinois for
Yeah,
that.
I was just thinking we
yeah.
might come.
Yeah,
If
it's pretty cool.
If you
We're,
didn't have
we're-
me at the awesome 2 days, you had me at the wineries.
Yeah, well,
I'll be
that's what a lot of people did. Yeah, it was the dinner. A lot of people were a little buzzed up when they got back, which was kind of fun. That's I endorsed it. Hey, that's fine. That's what the shuttle's for.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's going to be a really fun event. So if there's any Illinois teachers out there, look up the LTC. The EdTech Next information's on there for you. So yeah, light summer as far as events go because of
Sure.
newborn baby Sondgeroth coming soon. So But
yeah.
I'll be at all the big ones next year though. FETC. I'll probably be back at ISTE 2023. And all the Illinois conferences I try to go to. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward to hopefully meeting you in person. Thank you so much for
Good.
coming on the show today. I feel like I could talk about this with you for hours. It's just incredibly fascinating. So thanks for the work that you've done to put into it. And thank you, more importantly, for being so willing to share it with others so we can learn and benefit from your work too.
Yeah. I'm always happy to talk and share about anything. So, feel free to, you guys anytime you want a guest, I'm happy to come on. As you notice, I like to talk. So, and talk about coaching and technology and all that stuff is right up my wheelhouse. So happy to be on. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. So this was a really great session. Just a reminder that we do have our coaches camp coming up. We're talking about, summer things and what's all happening. So we have our coaches camp coming up, 2 opportunities. One's going to be in New Orleans before ISTE, and the other will be here in Cincinnati. So make sure that you get registered for that, and you can use the promo code RRPodcast in all caps to get you $50 off for your registration. And then make sure you tune in for our next episode on April 26th. We're going to have Jill Du Bois and Anna Marie Reinhardt joining us, and they're going to be discussing how you can create positive moments of joy in our schools and just in life in general. So that should be a really good episode coming your way as well in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone will be able to use a little joy during
so.
testing season. So hopefully it lands at a good time there. So be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RRCoachCast.
And also feel free to reach out and let us know what topics you want us to discuss on social media.
So press the restart button,
Recharge your coaching batteries, and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
a Tech Coach collective. All right, awesome. Ben, thank you
man.
so much. Yeah, sorry, thanks for sticking around to the end. And
Oh, no, it's fine. I have a 40